Hey, everybody, welcome to your readings for the week. These are the readings for the week ending March 11th. So, our first full week of March here. I'm still in a retrograde free zone. So, that's kind of nice for everybody who's got to deal with planets in their sign right now. At least we're not dealing with any retrograde. So, that is good. Let's go ahead and get to our readings. And I did not open up my list, which would be good to have just in case. Okay, here we go. Should be always good to be prepared. Okay, moving on. So we are going to start with Darcy. Uranus still in Taurus. We're about halfway through. So that means that Uranus has been in Taurus for about 3.5 years, and we have about another 3.5 years to go because it's about a 7-year-long commitment, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. Not a bad one though. Uranus is my ruling planet, and I think that the difficulty always lies in the fact that Taurus is a fixed sign and an earth sign, and earth signs are not the idea makers. They're the ones that get things done. And it's not saying that you don't come up with fantastic ideas, because I know you do, but they're the doers. Earth signs are the doers. They're the ones that build it and get it done, kind of a thing. So they're the architects. Somebody comes up with an idea and you draw it out and say, this is how we're going to build a building, kind of a thing. Uranus is a very different type of energy. It's very out of the box. They're big risk takers. They are very much promoters of change. This is why Aquarians don't make any sense at all, because we're also fixed signs that don't like change. But an age of Aquarius happens and the whole world just changes. So it flips right up on top of its own head and then winds up changing, which actually happened during the pandemic. We did also hit an age of Aquarius at the same time. So yeah, it really is all our fault. We'll just go ahead and take responsibility for that. Uranus is not squared with anything or in opposition with anything this week. I think it does kind of move into opposition with the moon at the end of the week, because the moon actually ends the week in Scorpio here. So we'll get to that at the end of the week. But aside from that, Uranus is very much in very positive aspects with other planets, specifically all week long, in a sextile with the sun and Mercury, as the sun and Mercury are moving through Pisces currently right now. Focus for them is on career as well as long-term goals. So we're looking at your long-term career goals here. Uranus is focused on your support system. So there's a couple of things that I feel come from that. One, if you're looking to expand in your career, you want to make sure that you're looking for support from the right people. People who don't really understand the direction you want to go in your career are not going to be helpful, because you're going to have to explain yourself over and over again. And if they don't understand it quite, as much as maybe they should in order to make the decision, they may be against it. And then you're sort of getting false information because it's somebody that's supporting you that, really shouldn't have that job, so to speak, that responsibility. So I'm actually picking up that what's really important for you is just to find the support within the realms that you work, that can help you to take the steps to advance in your career. And we're talking support that's not necessarily somebody that you would think of as being supportive. That's where Uranus's influence comes in. Uranus is like, look outside the box, not what you would normally think would happen, but completely outside the box. I do actually feel that there is somebody already coming through. So it may be somebody that you already know. It just, it's highly possible with the conversations that you have had or their job description, it's not somebody that you would necessarily think would be able to help you with these goals. So as we get into the end of the week and the moon moving into opposition with Uranus, the moon's position is very much focused on those you love. And so I feel that this is Saturday, but I kind of feel that this is going to bring up one of those situations where you feel sort of torn between what someone else needs and what you need to do, or your responsibility to your career, or what have you. There's also that element of somebody needing support and you not being able to support them, and them coming back and saying, well, I always support you when you need it. How come you can't be there to support me? Well, I mean, there's like a million times. I'm sure you've been in that situation. I've been in that situation a million times too. Sometimes there's nothing that we can do. You can support them as much as you can support them, but honestly, really, when it comes down to it, sometimes there's just nothing that you can do, and it feels crappy to be placed in that situation. But you can't put your job at risk either, because I don't really feel that this is something that is like a life or death situation for this person either, which would make that decision would go in a very different path. So it's not so much that this challenge is like, that's it, I'm never going to be friends with that person anymore, but emotionally, I'm sure it can feel that way in the moment. This opposition is going to continue into Sunday. So we're going to kick off the week with this same thing. So pretty much all weekend, we're dealing with this moon opposition. And I just feel that, in all honesty, I want to say that when situations like that come up, the absolute best thing that you can do is try to manage your feelings about it as much as possible. The more you work through your feelings, you can eliminate some of that guilt. You can, you're basically putting yourself in a situation to not be manipulated. You're like you got a manipulative proof bubble around you, let's say. Because there's a lot of people out there that do this. It's very common these days for this to happen. And I'm in this situation myself all the time. I put my manipulative proof bubble up, and that says I will not be emotionally manipulated. I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. I mean, there's a million reasons why that would come up for me personally. So with that being said, if these reasons are coming up for you, you have to protect yourself as much as you possibly can emotionally. And that's hard. Most Tauruses that I know, they have a really big heart. They want to be helpful. They want to be there, to support the people that they love. It's just not always possible. And I feel like this is just one of those situations where it's not possible for you to give them exactly what they're asking for. I mean, it's possible to give them something, but not exactly what they want, if that makes sense. And shame on them if they're going to make you feel bad about it. That's kind of where I go with that. So I do feel like lately we've been talking a lot about career and different career moves, and that's going to get more and more prominent as we start to move through into Taurus, when focus really is going to be on your career here in the next few weeks. And the next few months. And I do feel that certain changes may be lining up to actually be changes here in the next few months for you, in a positive way. So I don't see this as a step backwards. I definitely see this as a step forward. So that's what I have for you, my dear. And I'm going to move on to Jeannette. We still have Mars in Gemini for the next couple of weeks or so. It is leaving, I promise. Or will be leaving, I promise. Still focused on the trauma space. So your inner closet, so old trauma, old anger, old BS, still kind of ruling things. And all week long, Mars continues to be in a square with the Sun and Neptune. Next week, Mercury will also be part of that square. So this is something that's unfortunately not just a this week thing. It's actually going on for a couple of weeks here. The Sun and Neptune are very much focused on career. So I know that you are in the process of looking for a job. And I know that I feel like there's a couple of things that are sort of coming out of this this aspect here. First of all, you have to be very mindful of past experiences that had a negative impact and worrying about those being a problem again. So I know we semi-touched on, we didn't really talk, but we semi-touched on a store that you worked at out there with a person that created a negative environment, kind of a thing. And what I'm saying here is that it's very important to be aware of how fears and frustrations that started with that maybe influencing decisions on which jobs you're going to take now, if that makes sense. I mean, nobody wants to work in a negative environment, and nobody wants to work for an egotistical prick or whatever the heck he was. But unfortunately, the real world is full of those people. And so unfortunately, we may have to look at it for what it is. But my big thing is, if you see those personality traits in somebody, not to jump to conclusions that they're the same as the other person, if that makes sense. Also, understanding why people are that way is really helpful. Most of the time, people who are really overbearing, really controlling, really egotistical, that comes from a very damaged place in their past. And it's a reaction to the same person that almost feels like they have nothing to offer in the world. And they, both of those things stem from the same place. And when you understand that, you also have a little bit more of an understanding of somebody who's acting like that, because you tend to look at it less for as an attack on you and more as this poor person must have gone through some pretty serious stuff in order to get to being this person that they are right now. So when I look at it that way, it helps me to work with the person the way they need to be worked with and not react it to the way that they are, if that makes sense. Now, helpful, we do have Mars continues to be in a sextile. Actually, I do believe it's a grand sextile here in the next few days with Saturn as well as Jupiter. Jupiter's all about growth and expansion and very much focused on career right now. So all of this energy is going towards building that money-making system, and Saturn is focused on your long-term goals. So this actually releasing some of this, letting go of anger from the past, is sort of opening up these avenues for you in order to get the energy to move positively towards these things. So in terms of getting a job, I see you working honestly, by the end of next week, I see you with a job, whether you're actually physically at the store or not. And there's definitely been a conversation, there's been an acceptance, there's been an offer, there's been an acceptance by next week. Whether you choose to take that job or not, that's a different story. But I do see that offer happening at least by the end of next week. So that's what I've got going for you this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Connie right after I take a swig of my coffee. We're going to kick off the week with the moon. Yay. I know. In opposition with Saturn as well as Mercury right off the bat so this is Sunday is when this is happening. Luckily, it is a Sunday. Hopefully, it's a non-work day and non-family day, but focus continues to be on your thought process, how you think things through, and the moon's opposition with Saturn and Mercury, both of which are focused on long-term goals. This is actually very interesting. So this doesn't tell me that your career or your family or any of them are involved. It does tell me that one of the things that is going to come up that day is how your mind or the way that you process thoughts emotionally or non-emotionally, either way, affects whether or not you follow through on your long-term goals. Now, with that being said, we have gone through plenty of conversations about negativity in your environment, not your physical environment is in your house. There's not a lot of that there, but in terms of the people around you and how that infiltrates into how far you've come right now. And so I feel like in many cases, when you feel like you're lost or you don't have a direction, or you're looking at your schedule and you're not seeing anything that's jumping up and going, hey, we're going to make you rich this week or what have you, it's very important to manage how you're thinking about that. So for instance, let's just say that I asked you to sit down on this day on Sunday, the beginning of the week, and create your schedule. How much of what's going on in your brain while you're doing that is positive and how much of that is negative? And we've talked about people who are on your schedule that have no-showed you before. We've talked about situations with people who say they have a ton of money and they really don't. We've talked about, I mean, it's mostly no-shows and people and reschedules and things like that that are the really, really annoying thing about this. But if your brain is automatically going to, that person's going to no-show me again, chances are you're going to do everything you can to get them off your schedule. And while I agree with that, I don't agree with dumping them and not calling. Not that you would. So it's kind of one of those things where if you're putting that kind of energy into the way you're thinking about the situation, you've already basically written them off as somebody who's not gonna work with you, which is absolutely not necessarily true. Yes, in the past it may have been, but it's not always the case, and we do have to leave room for things to react differently than the way they have in the past. So a better way of looking at that is, let me connect with this person and see if they're available to work on this, see if they're available for me to help them work through their financial situation. Same thing with things like the trying to think of the words that you used around engineers, but I can't think of the word. Engineers, you already have a preconceived notion of how they are, because you've worked with so many of them. Analysis paralysis. That's what it is. They get that analysis paralysis, right? Because this is your automatic, this is what's going to happen with them. 9 times out of 10, you may be manifesting that and then sort of denying yourself the one engineer who doesn't have analysis paralysis. I'm sure there's one out there, you just haven't seen him yet. So basically, I really feel that this moon situation in your sign on Sunday is just going to put you into this sort of emotional place. If your brain is going to all of these possibilities, you get to this emotional, overly worried place. And I feel like the lesson here that the moon is trying to tell you is you are your own worst enemy. Get the hell out of your head and stop doing that. As the moon moves out of there into Monday, the moon is gone, moved into Virgo. We're done with it. We can, move on. Focus still continues to be on how you mentally process things. This is a great time for you to be aware of how you're mentally processing. It is the first step to being able to change that, or it's the first step to actually choosing to change that. That's how we're going to word that. That's what I have for you, Connie. And I'm moving on to Jenny. We're going to kick off the week with the moon in Leo, which is a little, but it's Sunday. So at least, hopefully it won't be infiltrating, business and all that stuff the next day, which is good. The moon's opposition with Saturn and Mercury does create a little bit of a challenge for you, specifically as those planets are focused on your long-term goals. And Leo is very much focused on how you think or mentally process information. Human beings are generally wired to think negatively. It's just how we are. Positive thinkers usually have to do a lot of work to continuously be a positive thinker. You're constantly reminding yourself to think positively. So with that being said, I don't think any of us are really born positively wired, if that makes sense. Or we're all born positively wired, but life changes that and our experience changes that. I really feel that this challenge, the way that it's working out for you, is you've got a lot of things going on. You've got a lot of decisions maybe that need to be made. Situations come up all the time that just freak us out. And all of a sudden we were comfortable with the decision that we made. And then we start worrying about whether or not that was a good decision. And it's the panic. I really feel the panic strongly coming through here. And in all honesty, I feel that, well, obviously that's not going to help you to make a good decision. It's not going to help you. But also, I kind of feel like we all go through that. Anytime you're faced with something new, there's a panic of whether or not we're going to be able to do it, when what we have been doing is so comfortable because we've sort of, gotten ourselves into a comfort zone with it, right? So naturally, we start overthinking about crazy things, and consequently, we freak ourselves out, and then we have all this fear around something, and then maybe we make the wrong decision because we made the decision based on fear. Obviously, making that decision on Sunday with the moon's involvement, probably not a good idea. And if you are stuck in that emotional thinking pattern, it's a good time to identify if that's the case. 9 times out of 10, as human beings, we let fear make our decisions. And that's not always a good idea. Actually, it rarely ever is a good idea. We should be the ones making our decisions. And yes, we should make them based on how it feels. And if it logically makes sense, that's where we bring that balance into it. When fear takes over, there is no balance. You are making a decision based on things that may or may not happen. period. And I mean, if they do happen, okay, well, do you need to know how to deal with that right this minute? Not necessarily. It's best to eliminate all the coulda, shoulda, oh my God, what might happen now, so that you can make the decision to the best of your ability with a clear head, if possible. As the moon moves out of your sign into Monday, things are going to calm down, but we're still on that mental focus there. And I really think that this is a good time for that, especially at the beginning of the year for most people, because, well, it's Leo's focus right now. So it's really a good time for you because you have so many things going on, and there are so many things that can put you in that negative mindset, or put you in that frustrated mindset, or throw you into that emotional thought process because you're reacting to all the stuff that's going on around you. So bottom line here for me is, this is a perfect time for you to be aware of that. The more you're aware of, are these emotional thought processes coming up because of something that I'm going through, or am I picking up on everybody else in the office? And if you're picking up on everybody else in the office, you need to ground and bubble way more while you're in the office, and that'll help you to be able to eliminate that. Because let's face it, we got a lot of crap of our own to deal with. We don't really need to deal with everybody else's. So that's what I have for you this week. And I am going to move on to Linda. So we have the moon moving into Virgo on hold on one second here. In opposition with, yes, my microphone is detected. Okay, my computer does this weird thing every now and then. In opposition with the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and as we move into Tuesday, we'll be in opposition also with Neptune. The Sun and Neptune are focused on career. Saturn and Mercury are focused on long-term goals. So we're going to squish those together in terms of long-term career goals. And Virgo's focus is on home. The moon's focus is on home. I know you're moving and you're in the process of moving. This creates a huge, so you're pulling back and forth between, I've got work to do and I need to do it. I've got responsibilities in terms of this move. I have to do it. I just really feel, of course, as we get into Tuesday, this opposition becomes a T-square as the moon lines up with Mars as well. And Mars is very focused on inner trauma, and Mars is all about anger. So a couple of things kind of come up with this, actually. First of all, being pulled back and forth in these two different directions, and you're trying to juggle both of them at the same time. I just feel like a lot of issues are taking place with that. Obviously, scheduling issues. We were supposed to meet last week, and we weren't able to because of everything that's going on. So obviously, I've already seen that that's happening, but I don't feel it's just me either. I feel that this has become very difficult for you to be able to balance both of these things because they're both pretty big. And then as we enter the moon and give this an emotional element on top of it, it becomes even more challenging and even more difficult. So bottom line here is that there's two things that are coming up. One, I feel like you're releasing some frustration and anger over old situations that are exactly like this, where you're trying to toggle back and forth between your career and your responsibilities at home. Remember back to those days where you had children at home, and it just it's so, we do a good job, you do a really good job being a woman of leadership, a leading lady in the business world, and being able to take care of your responsibilities at home. But that doesn't mean, and I know that you'll agree with me, that it was always easy either. There were times in the past where your children became a priority, your family became a priority. Circumstances took place that unfortunately took your focus away from your work. I feel like the more you try and balance everything and do it all at the same time, the more it feels like you're failing on both. And this moon thing coming in is really going to show you that it's not that you're failing, it's that you're trying to do everything at once and you're not even allowing yourself any time to rest from that. So yes, things get overly emotional and then you realize, oh, okay, this is happening for a reason. It's happening because I need to prioritize a little bit better, if that makes sense. As the moon moves out of your sign, you have no planet influences happening in there. So things do sort of calm down a little bit. And I'm going to say towards the end of the week specifically, there's some time that opens up for you to really just focus on getting things organized at home. I think that once you get those things, there's specific things in the home that just really need to be organized. Once you get those things down, everything else is just kind of a piece of cake, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, my dear. And I'm going to move on to Matalyn. We have the moon moving into Virgo on Monday this week, moving into opposition with the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn on Monday, and then a T-square. This turns into a T-square, I should say, as that opposition continues with the Sun and Neptune, and the moon moves into a square with Saturn. Saturn's focus is on inner trauma, and Saturn is all about anger, represents anger. So that could indicate that there's some old anger over certain things that is coming up around a specific emotional situation around this time on Tuesday. The Sun and Neptune are focused on career. The moon is focused on home. I kind of feel like there's a couple of things that I kind of feel are coming out of this for you. The first thing is I don't really feel like you've chosen like what you want to do as a career, if that makes sense. You're still kind of exploring, which is okay. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. The problem that occurs with that is that when it seems to take too long, it starts to become confusing, and then it starts to feel like you have no direction, and then that starts to get really scary. It just sort of snowballs from there. And it also provides you with some excuses as to why it makes it easier for you to point the finger at other people as to why you haven't made this decision and not necessarily own up to your own shit, which we all have to do from time to time. It is a lot easier to point the finger, but if you point the finger, three more are pointing back at you. And if you do this, you will see that these three fingers are literally pointing back at you. So when you are pointing the finger at other people, remember that. It's a hard lesson for all of us. Trust me on that. But the sooner you can learn it, the easier it's going to be for you. Trust me. It definitely will help you be more successful. Nothing comes out of passing the puck to somebody else. So just so you know, it's very rare that anything good ever comes out of that. I really feel actually that what's going to happen in terms of emotions coming up and possible old anger over certain situations coming up, I kind of look at this as well, there's a couple of different ways I can look at it. One, I feel like you're reacting to a situation that's been going on for long enough and you're sick and tired of dealing with it and being angry about it. And when the situation comes up, the anger, it just seems like it takes you forever to work through the anger. And it's really wasting time. And it doesn't seem like the time waste is really that big of a deal right now. You're young, you just turned 18, you've got all kinds of time, right? It starts to become an issue later on. And if you don't set up a way for it to not be an issue now, it becomes a bigger issue later on. So all of a sudden you get to like where you're John and Mikey's age, right? Where they're looking at 30 right now. They're not quite there, but they're looking at 30. And all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, what did I do with my life? And then this panic ensues because they still haven't figured it out yet, right? I mean, John's still searching and he's 26 years old. And that's not a problem. I'm not saying there is a problem with that, but it's causing him to panic because he hasn't quite figured it out. And he has pointed the finger at, everybody also, which hasn't helped him. So bottom line is that if there's a current situation that keeps coming up that creates an emotional response, that all of a sudden you're stuck for 2 or 3 days just focused on being pissed off about this experience, it's wasting time. And while that's not a big problem now, it will be a big problem later on. The truth of the matter is you can't control anybody else. You can't control what they're doing. You can't control what they're saying. You can't sacrifice what you need to do for another person. And it doesn't matter who that person is. Depending on the situation. Obviously, if something happened to your mom right now and you had to full-time take care of your grandpa, that's a different situation, right? Then let's say there's somebody around you that is making poor choices and you're constantly having to help them fix that problem. That is a waste of your time. And you can't, most people do that thinking, well, I'm going to help them and then they'll stop doing it. Hold your breath for that. Okay. It doesn't happen like that very often. Sometimes it does, but it really doesn't. You really are just wasting your time. And then one day you're going to look around and go, I could have been finished with college by now had I not been constantly sidetracked by this person. So that's kind of, a little bit of a discomfort, but it's not the end of the world. And as the moon moves out of your sign, by Wednesday, there is no other planet influence. Focus continues to be on the home, your home environment. And I do see changes being made in your environment, specifically in your own room. It's almost like you're going through this change of where it's not so much, it's out with the old and in with the new to a certain extent, but I don't really see you getting rid of anything or bringing anything in. I just see things being changed to a way that makes more sense for you now, as opposed to the way it was set up back then, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, darling. And I am going to move on to Theresa. So we have the moon moving into Libra on Wednesday, moving into opposition with Neptune on Wednesday. Focus is on the home for you at this time. Neptune's focus is on career. This sort of provides one of those instances where you feel like you're being pulled in between the two places, and with both planets being very emotional or known for being very emotional, this can really be a challenge for you. I feel like, in all honesty, nobody handles an emotional situation quite like you do. You have a lot of strength when it comes to that, especially if it's somebody else's emotional situation. It's not necessarily something that you're dealing with personally. It's something that you're helping somebody else deal with, and you have a lot of compassion for that, which is really good. The issue here, though, is that it feels like you're being pulled in between two different emotional situations with two different people. And one of those people, it has to do with work. And so it's not that they're fighting over you. It just feels like there's not a whole lot of time for you because your focus is on these two people all the time, if that makes sense. That could be a little bit of a challenge. And with the moon moving into opposition with Neptune on Wednesday, it can just feel like it's a bit emotionally overwhelming for you. As we move into Thursday, the moon moves into opposition with Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter's focus is on career. Venus's focus is on your support system. Again, the moon is focused on home. So this situation, these two emotional situations that you feel like you're being pulled back and forth towards, I do feel still exist as we get into Monday. My concern is Jupiter is all about growth and expansion, and it sort of feels to me like this situation may hinder your growth a little bit. So you want to make sure that you're not sacrificing what you need to do in order to be present for somebody else. And that just, that basically just means to make sure that you communicate ahead of time that this is what you can do, but you can't go any further than that, if that makes sense. So we'll kind of help it to not be quite as emotional a situation as it could be. The moon's trine with Mars is actually very interesting. Mars focus being on our inner trauma, so really representing a lot of old anger. I feel actually what's interesting about this to me is that your old anger is really what's helping you in this situation now. And I feel like the reason that it's helping you is because one of these two people is in a situation that it feels very familiar to you. And when you can connect in that way with the situation, it helps you to be more of service to that person because you really understand and resonate with what they're going through. So it is helpful, even though it may be a little difficult. Moon moves out of there by Friday. There are no planets influencing your sign. We do continue to have Ceres influencing your sign for the rest of the week as the moon is out of there. Ceres is retrograde this week, still focused on the home. I really feel that Ceres influence being the nurturer in retrograde, it's about nurturing self. It's about mirroring that, giving back to yourself. And well, the one thing that I just want to say about that is most Libras make the mistake of nurturing others with the expectation that they will be nurtured back. And most Libras are disappointed. So, I mean, Libras are referred to as martyrs because they consistently sacrifice their own needs for other people. Ceres is a really good influence that reminds you that you can give what you give to everybody else to yourself, and in the same amount also. So make sure that self-care is definitely a priority for you, because the more you can prioritize that or make self-care a priority, the more you can be there to help others, because that is something that is very important to you. So that's what I have for you, Theresa. Moving on to Regina, the moon is going to move into Scorpio on Friday, and I am going to pause really quick because my husband's calling. Okay, I am back. Regina, all right. Moon is going to come into Scorpio Friday, be there all day Saturday into Sunday. We're going to kick off next week with the moon in your sign as well. Before we get to that point, though, Scorpio is very much in between focuses this week, up until the moon moves into your sign and provides a focus for you. But up until that point, I feel like when a sign is in between focuses, it's a beautiful time for you to focus on what you want to focus on, if that makes sense. I think the universe always provides a lot of opportunities for us to work on certain things in our growth. And being in between focuses gives us the opportunity to choose what we want to work on, basically, or if we just want to rest and don't want to work on anything. So usually that's the one that I choose, to be honest with you. Especially when you just got all kinds of stuff going on all the time. It's definitely a good opportunity to rest. Not saying that nothing else is going to come up, because sometimes it does, but what it basically means is there's nothing in particular that's going to come up. It's could be anything kind of a thing. I do feel that when the moon does come into your sign, focus is on those you love. And as the moon comes into your sign on Friday in a T square with Venus as well as Pluto. Venus's focus is on those that support you, and Pluto is focused on finances. Now, this creates one of those very emotional situations where it feels like those people that should be supporting you are not supporting you. This happens a lot in our marriages. This happens a lot with really good friends, especially people that we support a lot. They just don't seem to support you back. It becomes a very emotional situation, especially with the moon being involved in it. So, and I feel like this is actually coming from, because finances are involved, I feel like this has a lot to do with your financial goals, maybe even putting money aside for something specific that somebody comes in and decides that what they need is more important. And it really creates this, okay, so screw what I need because that's not important. As usual, my needs or wants or desires or whatever are not important. The thing is that when you take it to that place, you're taking it to a place that is very difficult to recover from, because you are giving up. You're saying, I have no control. Everybody else does. So I'm just going to sit here and be a victim. That's not necessarily going to help you move forward in any way, shape, or form. Best thing to do in that situation, to handle that situation, I don't see that the money can be saved or salvaged. In fact, I kind of almost have this feeling like this is somebody that spent more money than they should have and didn't exactly tell you about it beforehand. So you're gonna have to recover from it. But you can recover from it with a clear head, or you can attempt to recover from it and possibly not recover from it in an emotional space, which isn't really going to work for you, because those emotions get in the way and then it makes you powerless to be able to fix the problem. As we move into Saturday, that aspect kind of dies down into an opposition with Uranus. Uranus is focused on your support system. So again, we're just dealing with this. Do I have support? Don't I have support? When you're in a place where it feels like nobody supports you, that sucks. Okay. It really feels terrible, but it's not always the way that it actually is. And if you're thinking about it in that emotional space, chances are you're not looking at it the way you need to look at it. You're not looking at it through clear glasses. You're looking at it through foggy glasses. And when you look through foggy glasses, you don't see what's really there. So my advice to get through this is really just to make sure that, emotional situations happen all the time. When you're an emotional sign, they can happen a little bit more often, maybe. But the more you look at the situation through logic and not emotion, the more you see a clear solution to the problem. Whereas if you're looking at it emotionally, you're never going to find that solution. So that's what I have for you, Regina. And I am going to pause for just a minute. Okay, moving on to Theresa Sheppard. We are kind of in between focuses this week, at least up until the end of the week when the moon comes into your sign. When you're in between focuses, to me, there's a couple of things that come out of that. One, it gives you an option to choose what you want to focus on. The universe isn't providing the lessons for you. You get to choose basically what you want to focus on. So, focus on career goals, focus on regular goals, focus on whatever it is that you want to put your energy towards. The other thing is that it sort of eliminates that space to where if you choose to focus on something specific, something else isn't coming in the way to make itself more prominent. So I really feel actually that right now for you, a lot of this has to do with your own financial goals, your own work goals, and just giving you some space or opening up some space for you to really focus on what direction you want that to go in, if that makes sense. So it just feels like things, there's some time that's opening up there for you to be able to do that. I don't see it as an incredibly busy week for you. As we get to the end of the week and the moon moving into your sign, that brings focus on those you love pretty much right off the get-go. And the moon moves into a T-square right off the bat with Venus and Pluto. Venus is focused on your support system, those that support you. Pluto's focused on finances. The moon's focused on those you love. I kind of feel like this is going to bring up one of those senses of whatever you're working towards, it feels like somebody else is just sort of hemorrhaging, if that makes sense. And that's really, really frustrating when that happens. You have specific goals, and it's not that the people around you don't know what those goals are. I don't even see this as being done on purpose, to be honest with you. It's more like you've gotten yourself in this financial situation to where things are a little bit more comfortable, and then all of a sudden your husband has a new medication and it's ridiculously expensive, and all your money's going towards that. So to me, it's life that giving you that 2 steps forward and yanking you by the chain 1 step back kind of a feeling, specifically around your finances. As we get into Saturday, that calms way, way, way down. The moon's in an opposition with Uranus, which will continue into the beginning of next week as well. So we're going to end this week and begin next week in the same sort of situation. Focus continues to be on those you love, and Uranus's focus is also on those that support you. And this sort of creates one of those situations where the people that you have always been there to support aren't always there to support you when you need it the most sometimes. And that can be also really frustrating. Being a mother also, a wife also, we sacrifice a lot of our energy, our lives, our feelings for other people, and when that is not reciprocated, it really feels crappy. Of course, it's not always reciprocated, unfortunately. This is a very common problem where we give everything and it feels like we get nothing back. It's not necessarily true all the time, but it can feel that way a lot of the time. I sort of interpret this as feeling alone in some cases, and being forced to be responsible for this decision, you and only you, which also causes a lot of resentment from time to time as well. The more that you can be ahead of your emotions, Um, rather than wallowing in how you feel, the more you can be ahead of it. Yes, feel how you feel. You genuine good reason to feel that way, but you don't have to float away with those feelings either. Have your moment, get frustrated, get angry, and then move on to the next step of what is it that you need to do in order to get through the situation. I feel like all of this is happening at home. By the way, I don't really see you traveling during this. I could be completely wrong. But I just feel that, there may even be, it may even be a good idea to take some time off to deal with this situation. I don't see this as being a situation that you can just take care of in 5 minutes and kind of walk away. I feel like you're going to need to spend some time with it, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, Theresa. And I'm going to move on to Jillian in the space that she's supposed to be with all the other Scorpios. Hi, Jillian. I didn't screw up this time. Very proud of myself, by the way. Okay, couple things going on this week. First of all, I will say, as we are looking at the beginning of the week, astrologically, there's no planets in Scorpio. And Scorpio is pretty much between focuses right now. What that means, honestly, is in terms of the astrological wheel, it has 12 different focuses. Those things commonly come up during that time. When you're in between focuses, it could be anything that comes up. There is never nothing's coming up. It just, life doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I mean, sometimes it does. There might be a little bit of that, but for the most part, you can't sit there and go, okay, no problems are going to happen, because it doesn't really work that way, unfortunately. To me, what in between focuses really means is that you get to choose what you want to focus on. So the specific situation isn't just coming up, forcing you to focus on it. You get to choose what you want to focus on, at least until Friday. And I'll talk about Friday here in a minute. Couple of things before we get to Friday that I see coming up for you. I want to say there's somebody that you're just not seeing eye to eye with. So it's not like I'm seeing you fighting with somebody necessarily. It's just there's this constant we don't agree issue, and it's not like I have to separate myself from this person because we don't agree. It seems like every time you talk to this person, there's a disagreement there. So one of two things, and it's up to you to figure out which one it is. One of two things is coming out of this. First, I feel that there's a sense of, like, if it's your grandmother, say, you guys have developed this communication pattern that is not healthy in the way that the two of you communicate. Now, you could say, well, she's the older person and therefore she should know how to communicate better. You could bounce that back to her, but I wouldn't. Okay. And the reason why I wouldn't is because I've learned over the years that changes are our responsibility to make. When you wait around for somebody else to make changes, you're giving them the power over your life, and that doesn't help you in the long run. Could give you an excuse, but that's not going to help you either. So we'll use your grandma as an example. If it seems like every single time you're communicating with her and it becomes a fight, it's a good idea to look at your response. I'm not saying that it's all your fault and it's not her fault. That's not what I'm saying. But by managing how you respond to her, you can change the conversation and how the conversation takes place. So for instance, one of the things that I teach my clients is that aggressive communication never works. It's a fight. It's always a fight. There's no resolution. And it's a fight that goes on forever. So if you are using aggressive communication, I'm not saying you are, I'm not saying you're not, but if you are, this may be why you continue to have the same conversation. Taking it back to yourself and changing the way what you put behind the words and the way you use the words actually will help change almost all the conversations around you, and possibly even change it into something that's more useful and productive, if that makes sense. So everybody gets into this communication pattern with the people around them, and they get stuck in it, and it just continues to cause problems. So that's one thing. I also feel that this communication issue, for lack of a better way of saying it, is very much present as we get into the end of the week, with the moon being present in your sign. As it moves into your sign, it moves into a T-square with Pluto as well as Venus. Now, Venus is very much focused on your support system. So those that support you, in opposition with the moon, which is focused on those you support. And a lot of times the people that support you are not, or the people that you support are not always there to support you. That happens a lot for a lot of people. Both planets being squared with Pluto, which is focused on finances. So we have a reason for the lack of support here. Finances are always going to be a problem. You could probably be the richest person on the planet, and finances are still going to be a problem. They're always going to create problems because it's such a necessity in life. And you can say, I hate money all you want. Not saying that you have, but a lot of people do, and you can hate it. That's fine. It doesn't change the fact that it is what it is. So, I kind of look at that as, if you are looking for someone else to support you financially, or you're in one of those situations where you're out of money, you need to borrow it, and you're just not getting it from the people that would normally support you, it's going to create an emotional experience, unfortunately. You get to choose how deep that experience runs, if that makes sense. As we move into Saturday, and this will continue into Sunday next week as well, the moon moves into opposition with Uranus. It's not quite as big of an aspect, so it's not quite as big as it was the day before, but it's still a bit of a challenge. Uranus is one of those planets. It's the most different planet out of all the planets because it's all about being different. It's about looking at things out of the box, which is not easy for a fixed sign to do. Scorpio is a fixed sign. Fixed signs don't like change. They like things to stay the way that they are. So asking you to look outside the box may not be the easiest thing in the world. But hey, I'm an Aquarius, which is also a fixed sign, and that's my ruling planet. So that's why I'm screwed up, just so you know. When it comes to your support system, and I know that sometimes it doesn't feel like you have a support system. Uranus is all about going out of the box and looking in different places for a support system. For instance, if you don't like the job that you have and you need to find another one, but you don't really know how to do that, you go to a career coach, or you go to a job coach, or somebody that can help you with that, either teach you how to do it or help you go through the process. And that's going outside of the box for your support. You're not just focusing on the people that are in the room, you're expanding to create a support system that works better for what you want to do. And so it does get helpful, and it starts to open things up too. I also am seeing, and I'm not sure if this is a suggestion that's coming through or something that you've been thinking of doing. I see you joining a group like a support group. I'm not sure if this is a like an emotional support group. I mean, it's geared around something specific. Or this, I feel it is very feminine driven. So it's almost like a female support group type of a thing, or a group of people for a specific purpose, either to learn something or to support each other or what have you. I am a hermit. I really don't like people as a rule. Okay. I mean, I do like people, but as a rule, I prefer my own company. I'd rather be by myself. That gets depressing after a while. You got to push yourself out into the world and meet new people. The more you do that, the less you feel like you're cornered, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, my dear. Moving on to Sheri. No planets in Sagittarius this week. Focus is on your day-to-day schedule in terms of what is getting done in your day-to-day schedule. I see you there with your little planner, your little calendar thing, crossing stuff off and moving stuff around. If you just use the Google Calendar, that would be easier, but that's not what this is about. I do see rescheduling taking place this week, which is annoying. Or although it may not be annoying at the same time. Sometimes it's just, hey, I was busy today and now I'm not, so that's kind of cool. Depending on what you do with that time. But I also I'm being told to tell you, and your mom's very much coming through with this. And she's like, you always say you don't have time to do all these different things. And she's like, you have time. You totally have time. Look at your schedule and see where you can make time. And there's something in particular that all it takes is a few minutes at a time. It's not like you have to invest this giant chunk of time into it. It's almost like crocheting a blanket, something that you can do, 10 minutes and then put it down and move on to something else. And over time, this little thing becomes a big blanket, even if you're only putting 10 minutes at a time into it. That makes sense. She's not saying you should crochet a blanket. She's just saying this thing you've been putting off and using the excuse of not having time for, you have plenty of time for. She's like, you're not fooling anybody. Kind of a thing. Number one. Number two, I really feel that you've been wanting to, there's something you've been wanting to do. And again, you've been saying you don't have time to do it. But it also doesn't take like a ton of time, if that makes sense. And I know that a lot of the time you tend to be more homebound and not be out and about. But I actually kind of feel that this is something that you would go to, and it's completely and totally you. So it's not a you and Matt thing. It's not a you and Maddie thing. This is something that is a Sheri thing only. The interest is for Sheri. Now, Sheri may want Maddie to go with her and may want Matt to go with her, but that's not what this is about. And I feel that this is coming up because it's really important that you have your thing that you do that doesn't involve anybody else, if that makes sense. Like, we get really stuck on, because we're married, we both have to do everything. Obviously, better than most people that Dave and I don't live our lives like that. Actually, we are two completely different lives and entities, but we do plan things together, but we lead these very separate lives. And that can be very scary from the woman's point of view. That can actually be really scary. A lot of times I use him not being there as a quote unquote protection excuse a lot, and that just gets in my way. It doesn't do me any good. So I feel like one of these things is popping up, and what's actually going to hold you back from experiencing that thing is the fact that you don't want to do it by yourself. You need to embrace your own company, specifically outside of the home. Okay, you can embrace your own company all day long when you're in your own space, but I'm talking about outside. And not because you have to do it, because you want to do it. I know it feels sometimes like you don't have the time to do that, but I do feel that you do have the time to do that. And this actually is something that's going to be very helpful for you. So keep that in mind, because your mental health is just as important as your physical health in terms of making sure that you take care of your responsibilities at home. So that's what I have for you. And I'm going to move on to Peg. We have no planets in Sagittarius this week. Focus is on your day-to-day schedule. I actually am seeing a couple of days that are pretty busy, and I'm seeing a couple of days that are pretty open. So a little bit of a balance, I think, there for you. But one of the big things that I really feel is coming through for this week is reschedules. I'm not saying that reschedules are a horrible thing necessarily, but I feel that it's been happening a lot, if that makes sense. And it's becoming very frustrating because it is happening a lot. Two things that come out of that. One, when dealing with personal experience, when dealing with a client that does that a lot, there comes a point where I have to explain to them, or I do take the time to explain to them, when you are constantly rescheduling your time with me, it is a problem for my schedule and my other clients. So I try to diplomatically kind of talk to them about how we need to schedule a time that you can make it, so that I don't have to deal with so many reschedules, if that makes sense. Or the other thing that I feel is coming up with that is to look at it in terms of free time. Sometimes my schedule is so full that the only free time I get is when somebody reschedules. So I will celebrate that with whatever I want for the next hour. It all depends on how you look at it. One thing that I also see coming up, though, is the opposite of that. It's somebody wanting to infiltrate your schedule when it's unwelcome. And I feel like this person in particular just thinks that they're the exception and it's okay and they can do that. I'm not sure why they think that, or where they're coming from with that. And I kind of feel like you've allowed this person to do it in the past, but this week you just can't. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. You just can't do that. So I also feel that you may need to put some very strong boundaries on a particular individual who feels like it's no big deal to just dance all over your boundaries, if that makes sense. So that's a couple of things that I see coming up for you this week. The other thing is, I do see some time open in your schedule this week, and you're kind of sort of not sure what to put in that time. I really just need to tell you that you need to, whatever you do, whether it's just you or you and your husband or you and a friend or what have you, it's really important that you put something fun into that time. Something that you're gonna have a good time with, something that does not have responsibilities right now. Not to say that you never do that, but I really feel that that's very much needed this week. A lot of that has to do with the weather. I think it just gets so depressing. Winter just goes on and on and on. I mean, really, it's almost over, but at this stage, you need something that's going to brighten things up and sort of put you back in the energy that you need to be in to focus. So that's what I have for you this week. And finally, moving on to Mama Sheri, no planets in Sagittarius this week. Focus is on your day-to-day schedule. I do see you I do see you having a pretty busy schedule this week in terms of classes and clients and other things as well. You know, going out shopping, things like that. Um, so it's not so much that you're getting together, you know, your time and your schedule. That's kind of already happened. I feel that this week is just one of those weeks where it's kind of a busy week for you. And it feels a little bit overwhelming at first, but then you just kind of sort of get through it and it's like, oh, this is nothing, right? It's amazing the power our brains have over making us freak out over things that we don't need to freak out about. But, you know, it is what it is, right? It's just what our brains do. I really feel like that this is a good thing. But also I want to say that somebody is going to come in and try to sort of force you to add more time in there that you don't have, because you'll be sacrificing that time from, say, yourself, if that makes sense. So I don't want to say don't be bullied into somebody disrespecting your schedule like that, because I don't see you being bullied, but don't be bullied into somebody expecting you to change your schedule for them, if that makes sense. I can think of a million people that you and I both know that would fit that, in all honesty. But and actually I'm not going to use the word bullied. It's not bully, it's manipulation is what it is. But you know how to deal with that better than most people that we know, so I'm not so worried about whether you're going to be manipulated or not. I honestly don't see it happening. What I do see, manipulation aside, is you after the fact second guessing yourself and going, maybe I should have just given him the time instead of moving him to next, blah 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 blah. You know what, not necessary. Make the decision and stand with it, stick with it, feel good about it. Tell your brain when it goes to that guilty place, hey, my time is just as important as theirs. So if they want something from me that is quality, they're going to give me my time to make sure that I can give them quality. That's what it comes down to. You and I both know it. So that's what I have for you. And that's what I have for everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging with the readings this week. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Make it a great week, everybody. It is in your power to make it a great week. I will see you guys next week.